Hey guys, we are back again with the second part of our conversation with Austin Henline. In case you haven't watched the first part yet, so go check that out first before you start with this part. And if you have watched it, then stay tuned because this episode will be even more insightful than the first one. With that said, let's enjoy the episode. For a person like me who has just started with creating content on LinkedIn, it is really hard to think of content ideas. So, I want to ask you, what were your content strategies when you initially started?
Yeah. For me, when I initially started, it was um, geared towards beginners. And what I say about that is like, find a topic, if you have no idea what you want to talk about,
Right.
let's say you find a topic that you're at least, you don't have to be an expert, especially college students. No one has 20 years of experience in a given field or 20 years of experience in a specific topic. So it can be something that you know moderately well, or you're just curious to learn. And then what you can do is just, if you read an article that you really enjoy, um, give a summary about it instead of just posting the article like, hey, I read this article, I like it. What I would recommend is, hey, I read this article that talks about this. Here are 4 takeaways that I learned, like a Cliff Notes. If you want to read it, the link is in the comments. Uh, so I started initially by targeting people who were beginners. If I'm pretty good at Excel, I could post Excel tips, Microsoft Excel tips for people who are just starting out. How do I build a macro? Or what are tips for doing, um, you know, shortcuts, etc. Um, so that's kind of how I started. Is even though I wasn't an expert, I just focused on gearing it towards beginners, and then also just things that I was learning. I was like, if people find it helpful, then great. If not, then I mean, I'm better off than if I hadn't even tried at all. Um,
Right.
so just give it a shot, and then you can literally post about anything that you feel can develop, someone as a person.
Right. Also, for beginners who are just starting, so should they take references from someone else's content? Is it a good idea? Should we do
Yeah, I
that?
think I think yeah, that's a good question. I've seen a lot of people on LinkedIn who get mad about it. Like they feel
Right.
like cheated out. Like, oh, so if you only do that, it can give off a bad reputation of like, oh, they only ever copy someone's content. But I think you can do it if you share your own perspective. So instead of literally copy and pasting someone's post, and then claiming it as your own, I would recommend not doing that. But what you could say is like, oh, I hadn't thought about I hadn't thought about this before. I'm going to create a post about this, but with my own experience or my own thoughts. So instead of copy and pasting literally and treating it like your own, that's plagiarism. I wouldn't do that. You can be inspired for sure by someone, what they said, and then just decide like, yeah, in my personal experience, this is what I believe, or I think this is really useful. So I engaging with other content and seeing other people who are posting, that has inspired me to create a lot of posts before. But I would never recommend just copying word for word what they said, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So my next question would be, how can you improve the reach of your LinkedIn profile with your posts, considering the LinkedIn algorithm?
Yeah. First of all, I will say, obviously, no one knows the LinkedIn algorithm. No one knows what's in it. If so, then it would be probably leaked somewhere on Google. It's very protected, so no one knows exactly what the algorithm is. But with millions of people creating content, there are people have discovered a few things that help. So, for example, um, the first hour is really important. Um, so in the first hour after you post a content, that's called like golden hour, and
Right.
that will impact like the overall reach of the entire post. So a tip for improving your reach if someone comments on your post in the first 45 minutes or the first hour, I would respond to that comment. So it's good practice to respond to comments, because LinkedIn doesn't differentiate really if it's your comment or someone else's. So if it starts out with 4 comments, by you responding to those, that suddenly becomes 8 comments. Or another great tip is, instead of just saying, hey, thanks so much for the comment, ask them a question. That helped me a lot. Of like, let's say you responded to a comment or to my post. It's like, hey, I loved this LinkedIn tip. Thanks so much. Instead of just responding like, oh, thanks for the thanks for commenting. I'd be like, oh, thanks so much. I'm curious to hear, is there a specific LinkedIn question that you have, or is there a specific tip that has helped you in the past? And then they come back and comment, and then I can come back and comment. So instead of like every single comment is an opportunity for another, if you engage them, just ask them a question or ask for their thoughts, as opposed to just say thanks, and then that can build your engagement with comments and then push it to more people. Another thing, I don't know how much it applies now, as something that people say is don't post links in posts. And the reason why that is if I'm sharing a link to a YouTube video or to a Google article, when they click on that link, they leave LinkedIn and then they're spending time on a different article, and LinkedIn doesn't want you to be leaving their platform. So what a lot of people say is don't post links. I've been doing a lot of like data analysis on my posts. I haven't always noticed that big of a difference anymore. It used to be a big deal. Like I used to never do it, but now I think LinkedIn maybe changed that a little bit. But in general, I would say keep links in the comments as opposed to the actual body of the post. And also resharing doesn't help. If you reshare someone's post, it's going to get very poor amount of views, as opposed to if you created your own content.
Right, that's some great pro tips from Austin. Okay, so a lot of people fear to step out of their comfort zone to actually start, posting content on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
So how can they overcome this fear?
Yeah, I think a few things. One is, I know this is probably overused advice or really cliche. It really is just comes down to give it a shot. Try out once, Granted, I think it is important to say, like, you can't really go into it with the highest of expectations. You can't create your first post and maybe expect it to have as much engagement as someone who's been creating content for 5 years and has built up a following. My first post, I think, had 2 likes, but I went in with it as like, I just want to try it, And so if I went in thinking I want 100 likes and a lot of comments, and I only got 2, I would have been like, oh man, I suck at this. I'm never going to try it again. So it is important to know that it does take time, but just give it a shot. And then over time, you also start to realize what works and what doesn't. So what I'd recommend is, if you do give it a shot, you can track it in an Excel sheet, or just write down what you wrote about. And then I personally analyzed some of my data just in an Excel sheet, and I was like, okay, I noticed that when I post about these type of things, it gets more engagement than when I post about this. That will be different for every person because your target audience is different, but try and get a feel for what your audience likes to read or what they enjoy. And then also, in regards to overcoming that fear, reach out to other people whose content that you enjoy and ask them for tips, or like, hey, when you started, was it scary? Like, what did you do to overcome that? So ask advice from people who are already doing it to see if they had any helpful tips that helped them as well.
Right. So I would like to ask you, how much time do you devote daily to content ideation and creation?
Yeah, that's tough say a specific time because for me it's very interspersed. Like I don't always necessarily sit down and like I'm going to dedicate an hour to creating content. For me, I have a notes app in my iPhone that whenever an idea comes to my head, I just write it down, because if I don't write it down right there, I'm going to forget, and then 2 hours later I'm like, oh man, what was it that I had an idea about, and it will never come back to me again. But if I write it down, it's locked in, and it only took 20 seconds to pull up my app, write that down. So for me, it's an accumulation of a lot of those 1 minutes of writing it down. But I would say I probably spend 2 to 3 hours. I'd say 2 hours each week, writing posts, ideating, thinking about it. Some weeks it's only 30 minutes, some weeks it's more time. But I'd say I sit down and do a good amount of content ideation and content creation, because I really like, I'm not that great of a writer. So it takes me like a while to actually think about and put into words what I'm thinking in my head.
Right. Now, coming to the most asked question, especially from the students, is LinkedIn Premium worth it?
Yes, that is a wonderful question. And since I work for LinkedIn, I should be careful of what I say, But no, I think that's a great question, and I'll speak from personal experience. It depends on how much you use it. For example, every LinkedIn Premium membership comes with free LinkedIn Learning. And if you use LinkedIn Learning and watch courses, then I think, yes, it definitely is worth it, because it shows to recruit you every time you finish a course on LinkedIn Learning, you can showcase that on your LinkedIn profile. And that shows recruiters like, hey, they actually care about this. It's like if I applied for a sales position or an engineering position, they're literally getting so many applications. But if they see like, oh, in their free time, they're watching LinkedIn Learning courses about sales or how to become a better engineer or how to become better at this, then they'll be like, okay, they're more serious. But if you don't use LinkedIn Learning, then I personally don't think that it's necessarily worth the cost. I love seeing who views my profile. You can see literally everyone who's viewed your profile, and you can get a few insights as far as like jobs. But for me, the big money value comes into, will you actually take advantage of your LinkedIn Learning premium subscription, and will you watch courses and put them on your profile?
True, very true. Also, I would like to add about LinkedIn Learning. Like recently, I've started doing some courses on LinkedIn Learning, and I must say the content is very nice, and all the creators are providing, great value content. So I'm
Yeah.
really liking it.
Yeah, it's great. And LinkedIn makes sure that the people who post on LinkedIn Learning are very credible. Like it's not anyone. It's like people who are established and very experienced in the industry.
Correct. So now, Austin, that we are at the end of the discussion. Before signing off, can you please give any parting advice to our audience?
Yeah, I think a few things. One, I think it's really important to determine why you are using LinkedIn, apart from just, all right, what I'm saying is you should decide why you want to use LinkedIn. If you're using LinkedIn only to get a job, then it might, right after you get a job, then you're probably going to stop. But if you decide that you want to use LinkedIn to build a network or to build a personal brand or to connect with recruiters or to learn more about a specific industry, then that will encourage you, even after you get the job, to continue using LinkedIn and building the profile. So if you only spend a little bit of time, you probably won't notice much of a difference. But if you spend only a few minutes, but every day, that accumulation will add up. So I would say, don't sleep on LinkedIn, where if you're only using it right now to get a job and then stop after you get a job, then the next time you want to look for a job, you're going to be in the exact same situation where it's like, oh, I'm stuck. I want to look for a job. But if while you have the job, you're still using it and building it up, the next time that you're looking for a job, it will be a lot easier. And then also, don't get discouraged. LinkedIn is a lot different than any other social media platform, than TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. You could create an Instagram account or a TikTok account or a Facebook account and have thousands of followers within a few days or a few weeks. But LinkedIn, that is really, like, I'd say really difficult to happen. So if you go in with a mindset like, oh yeah, I'm just going to do the exact same thing I did on TikTok to get a lot of followers, it's going to be tough. It takes a lot of time. So don't get discouraged. I would instead of recommending to spend if you spend 1 hour a day and then get burned out, I'd recommend instead of doing it for 100 minutes in one day, do it for 15 minutes every day, So spend a little bit of time every single day and comment on a post, engage with a post, build relationships. And then by doing that every day, over time, your network will grow. And then you won't even notice like how much time it took, because it actually becomes enjoyable. So I know that was long-winded, but I'd say that would be my advice, is not get discouraged and keep going.
Yeah, that was quite insightful. And I would like to conclude. Thank you so much, Austin, for joining us today. It was a super insightful session. And I'm sure our viewers would have learned a lot from your experience.
Yeah, thank you once again so much for having me here. And for anyone who is listening, I would love to, connect with you. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, or mention that you listen to this and say like, hey, I listened to this. I'd love to connect. And then by mentioning that, I'll know that you guys heard it around here, and I'd love to help out where I can.
Yeah, also viewers, Austin's LinkedIn profile's link would be mentioned in the description, so you can check that out. And that's it for today. Hope to see you next time.
That's it from our side, guys. We hope you enjoyed the video and learned a lot. This was our little attempt to share the knowledge with you from the expert in the industry. The link to Austin's LinkedIn profile would be in the description below. And if you have watched the video till here, then please do like, share, and subscribe. And also mention in the comment section below who do you want to see next on the podcast. Until then, this is Weber Vijayvargiya from the Leo Podcasts, signing off.